Welcome to the second video in a series of short videos on the subject of world building. In the last video I asked a question, and that's whether the famous haiku by Matsuo Basho, The Old Pond, involved world building in any way. Let's remember that poem again for a moment. The old pond, a frog jumps, the sound of water. Well, we know from the practice of this poet that he observed the things around him, he recorded them, and so almost certainly this was a recollection of an actual moment, a thing that happened. And so if we ask the question, is world building involved in this? We have to say, well, who is doing the world building? Who is doing it? Because the pond exists, or I suppose it existed a few hundred years ago. Now, when I read those lines, when I first came across them, I had a very clear image in my mind, and the sound of the frog landing in the water was very clear in my mind. I knew absolutely what it was. But then I discovered, unfortunately, that Matsuo Basho had left us a painting, a piece of art depicting this pond. And when I looked at that picture, I discovered that the image that I had in my head was not the same as the picture that Basho actually painted for us with pen and ink, or brush and ink. And this then presents me with a problem, because I'm expecting that everyone who came across those lines had their own imagination of what that pond must have looked like and what that sound must have sounded like. And actually, when I think about it, I realise all those images, all those mental images, must have been slightly different from each other, and indeed slightly different from the real pond that Basho saw. So what's going on here? Because a world is being constructed. Actually, as many worlds are being constructed as there are readers of that poem. But they're all different. And this forces us to think about something. And that is that the reader, the audience, is doing a lot of the work of constructing the experience of that pond. Now, although that's in a sense a work of nonfiction, we are all actively creating that world. So let's bring this back then to perhaps an example we might all recognise as world building, one of the most famous pieces of world building in the English language, and that goes back to Professor Tolkien marking papers in his office in Oxford and coming unexpectedly upon a blank sheet of paper. One of the students had left a sheet blank, and so he took his pen and he wrote on that blank sheet, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And it was apparently the beginning of this process of creating the book, The Hobbit, which of course was followed by The Lord of the Rings, and later we had the Silmarillion published, and there's all that extraordinary amount of work within film and literature that has emerged stimulated by that. Now, at the heart of The Lord of the Rings is a massive job of world building. Tolkien created 2 entire languages in order to sort of underpin that world, or you could almost see it the other way around, that because he was interested in languages, he created the world in order to underpin those languages. However it was, he did a huge amount of world building. And if you look at the lines that follow that introduction to The Hobbit, you'll see that he describes a bit about what a hobbit hole is like. That it's a nice place, a comfortable place, a place with pantries in it, and we see that Bilbo Baggins serves himself some cake at some stage, and we might wonder what the taste of that lovely seed cake is. But in this case, it's no different from the poem by Basho. that we are all creating this world in our own minds. We're all tasting that seed cake. We're all experiencing that hobbit hole for ourselves, and each version is slightly different. So this is, again, I say this sounds philosophical rather than practical, but this is going to open up a whole range of possibilities for us. And in the next short video, what we're going to do is look at how our minds are doing this job of creating those imagined worlds, how we, the readers, the audience, are collaborators in that process. And as we start to do that, we'll start to see a few of the techniques that we're going to have to adopt, if we haven't already, in order to most fully make use of this kind of learning. So if you've enjoyed this, please do click on the thumbs up at the bottom. It's a really great help if you do. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel.